90,000 people trampling over each other. Strangers clawing, scrapping, fighting, brawling, and wrestling to catch a glimpse of a corpse, of a beautiful corpse. Starlets using this occasion of grief, this parade of mourning, to launch a further continuation of their stardom. Rudolph Valentino, one of our first male sex symbols, dead at 31 in 1926 of ulcers, essentially. Rudolph Valentino is someone who has always mystified me. I believe that there are some people, just like there are some things, some wonders of the world that need to be photographed, that need to be documented in some sort of visual way, or else you would not believe they ever existed at all. It would sound like I was telling you some sort of tall tale, a myth. But Rudolph Valentino is one of these people who had to be documented, who had to be photographed, who had to be captured. They had a raw energy. They had what is something more than being photogenic. They had something legendary. They had something unreal. An inherent unrealism belongs to all of the great sex symbols. Rudolph Valentino is basically the prototype of that, and one of the most tragic figures as well. I love him in Four Horsemen, which was really his breakout role. But whenever I think of Rudolph Valentino, the first thing I will think of is him moving into the big city and sleeping in the park, being homeless, sleeping in 24-hour movie theaters, just watching the screen, without even a concept, without even a thought of how he would come to define such a large part of movies. That's incredible to me. The young Rudolph Valentino sitting there without even a notion that he would become one of the defining characteristics of the cinema. I think of him as basically he's called a tango pirate. He would dance with older women at parties or at dance halls. It's adjacent to a gigolo, so he's essentially a gigolo. And being a tango pirate is exactly what he was in the Four Horsemen. He's famous in that scene for having a very long dance and an extremely long kiss with another man's woman. He was very interesting. He was an olive-skinned Latin lover, a Don Juan, an entirely new type of leading man, as the critics said. There was endless speculation over his sexuality. He was also a very complicated and complex figure. His first wife probably never had sex with him. She was either bisexual or strictly a lesbian, and he had no idea of it until the night of the marriage. And he took so much offense to being called like a powder puff. In fact, when he was being operated on, the night that he died, when he came out of anesthesia, the first thing he said was, "Did I act like a pink powder puff or did I act like a man?" He was so at war with himself, with publicity, with the endless speculation over his sexuality and sexual habits, that's the first thing he thought of was his image, was his sexual image. He was being emasculated by the public, which is still what we see with sex symbols today. I mean, good God. Also, the fact that he was trapped in artless films for Paramount Studios, and he wanted to be a great artist, and yet he sold out for practically nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think he's such a fascinating figure, and at the same time, I really can't say that any of his films are remarkable, outside of the fact that they documented, cataloged, and recorded the presence of Valentino, the chic, which appealed to female rape fantasies, is a trash film based on a trashy novel. But the fact that these sex symbols, what they encapsulate, what they represent to the moviegoers everywhere, is something that they can't have. It's something that they want, but they can't necessarily admit to. hence the appealing to female rape fantasies, to fantasies of the foreigner, which completely scared the men of the time period could not understand Rudolph Valentino's appeal because he seemed so feminine, which also added to the speculation over his sexuality and his sexual appetites, wants, and desires. The Sheik is a very interesting film. The Son of the Sheik is better, and that's his last film, and that's actually nearly an okay film. I do like The Four Horsemen, but specifically for the scene that I referenced. He is an entirely fascinating figure. Some things demand to be photographed, don't just need to be photographed. And some people, accidentally, without any purposes, come to represent and define and set a standard of beauty, of elegance, of iconography for decades to come, for forever, for infinity. And Rudolph Valentino is certainly one of these people. When I think of Rudolph Valentino, I will always think of him young, watching reel after reel after reel after reel in that movie theater, homeless, basically a male prostitute. And yet he will become one of the most legendary figures in all of cinema history. A fascinating guy. He's one of the defining characteristics, not just of the silent era, but of cinema as a whole. Every future male sex symbol will always pale in comparison to the tragicomic life of Rudolph Valentino, to the lustful qualities, to that quality that radiates. When you watch a film of his or look at a photograph of the man, his appeal is radiating. You can feel it. It is a dynamic picture. It's a picture that is dynamic becoming. You can feel it exuding passion onto you. You can feel it. It's a very, very tactile, very visceral kind of image, kind of attraction, kind of understanding of symbol, a transcendence of symbol. This is true idol worship. Rudolph Valentino is a remarkable figure in film. There are several incredibly tragic sex symbols of the silent era, and Rudolph Valentino is certainly one of them. He seemed to always be after women who wanted nothing to do with him. They were either lesbian, or they were using him. Or they found out that he wasn't flush enough, that he didn't have enough money, that everything was image, everything was facade, but he had this, red-blooded drive to be an artist. And he never had the opportunity to properly express that, because he sold out for practically nothing, $500 a week, making these female rape fantasy pictures. He had something that was so much more. When he died, up to 90,000 people wanted to view his corpse, because it was one of the most beautiful corpses ever. It's one of the most beautiful personalities, one of the most beautiful images, one of the most beautiful figures ever captured on film. Therefore, his corpse could even transcend death itself if his living body transcended the medium of film. And it's very gothic, what I'm going to say. You never wanted to hear him talk, because he's transcendentally beautiful. He's transcendentally perfect and flawless. You don't want to hear him talk because he represents the silent era in the most potent possible way. Had he talked, perhaps that charming spell of Valentino might have cracked. But since he never talked, he's always crystallized in a glorious dynamic stasis of perfection, of tragedy, of romance, of mystery. He will always be that way. He will always be silent. And our love for him will always be as vocal as possible. What a fascinating figure. To Rudolph Valentino, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this first short video about idol worship, where I focus on some sort of star, transcend star, the phenomenon. That's what Rudolph Valentino was, and that's what this series, the kinds of figures, icons of these videos are going to focus on, are those who transcend simply being a star, as if that's simple, but transcending into a phenomenon. And Rudolph Valentino was definitely my first choice for the first episode, for the first video, I should say. We're going to be focusing on people who I am mesmerized by. I'm mesmerized by the likes of Rudolph Valentino. He hypnotizes me. It works. It's not a question of working. If it doesn't work, then I'm inhuman. How could it not work? He was so... Words can't describe it. Something that expresses the inexpressible is Rudolph Valentino on film. Moving. Rudolph Valentino in motion. That's what cinema is. Cinema is Rudolph Valentino in motion. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this first video of idol worship. In the comments below, what do you think of Rudolph Valentino? Do you think that any one of his films are great? Because he had the bad luck of being in several poor films in his very short career. What do you think of Valentino's presence? Because that's the thing. That's the thing that is so mesmerizing. That's the thing that is so... that is so controlling. I am controlled by that presence. When he comes on, it's not just a command. It's not just it's not just powerful. It's all-encompassing. I forget about my surroundings. He's one of the few people who can do that. In the comments below, share your thoughts on this subject. Also, like the video and share it if you know any kind of like silent film buffs, old Hollywood buffs. I love Rudolph. Rudy's great. Really enjoyed talking about this. Thank you guys very much for watching.